To sum up, we have said that we are going to devote our scientific effort to studying the processes of social cooperation, and that the leading role in those processes is played by human beings who act. These are men and women like you and me, who are endowed with an innate, creative, entrepreneurial capacity. Inenprehendo, prehendi, prehensum. A capacity for what? We are capable of discovering or creating new information, new knowledge, regarding the ends worthwhile to us, and the means we believe are available to us to achieve them. In this introduction, we stated that we are going to approach the concept of entrepreneurship from two perspectives. At first, from the perspective of a broader definition, and then from that of a stricter one. We begin with the broad definition and indicated that in a general sense, the idea of human action coincides with that of entrepreneurship. We exercise our entrepreneurship when we act. Human beings act to modify the present, the circumstances of which we consider unsatisfactory, and try to achieve something we value more highly in the future. We defined action as all deliberate human conduct. We excluded from the idea of action behaviors that are not conscious. We talked about the behavior of animals and sleepwalkers, etc. We considered how surprising it is that the idea of human action is identified here with that of entrepreneurship. From a young age, when we speak of an entrepreneur or an enterprise, we are referring to something much more mundane: a business firm, a company, a bank, a construction company. This is what enterprise meant to us. However, we saw that from ancient times, enterprise has carried the etymological meaning of action. The fourth meaning for empresa, enterprise, in the dictionary of the Spanish Royal Academy, an arduous and difficult action valiantly undertaken. We looked at the etymological origin of the term enterprise, inenprehendo, prehendi, prehensum, a Latin verb that means to discover, to create, to seize. So it refers to an action. We saw that in the Middle Ages, the term empresa was used to indicate valiant actions. We even read an excerpt from Don Quixote. Cervantes wrote that as Don Quixote was leaving his house, he suddenly realized that he should not yet have a device, empresa, upon his shield. Empresas were insignias that knights displayed to show they had committed themselves, under oath, to undertake a brave action, specifically to protect widows, fight knaves and scoundrels, and right wrongs. We saw that this etymological tradition has spread throughout Europe. In Portugal, an empreiteiro was and is a builder. In France, entrepreneurs were originally those in charge of building cathedrals. Also, we made a digression and discussed the evolutionary origin of languages, which are institutions that emerge and are alive because millions of human beings use them. We saw that English is the most dynamic language nowadays, and that a large part of its dynamism, flexibility and attraction derives from the fact that when an English speaker lacks a term, he or she has no qualms about borrowing a term from another language. Thus, in English, entrepreneur means the same as empresario in Spanish, and was taken straight from French. After this introduction, we moved on to the essential elements of the idea of human action. This is where we rolled up our sleeves and began to delve deeper into the sphere of economics. We introduced some concepts which provide the foundation for our entire discipline. The first concept, the first essential element of human action, is the concept of an end. The end is everything the actor intends to achieve with his or her action. Why? Well, because the actor attaches value to that end, and this is the second element of human action. Value is the more or less psychically intense appreciation that the actor assigns to his end. We all pursue ends because we attach value to them. They attract us like a magnet. We touched on how difficult it is to find adequate terms to describe such abstract realities. Nevertheless, we have an advantage. We are examining our own nature as human actors, and thus everyone knows firsthand what an end is and what value is, for we are constantly acting, and we know by experience what an end is. So, end and value. Human beings, when they discover or create, and we said that discover and create are synonyms that refer to the same thing from the standpoint of economics, when they discover a worthwhile end to which they attach value, they immediately seek out or create means available to them in order to accomplish that end. Means is the third essential element of the idea of human action, the concept of means. The means is like the bridge that connects us with the end we wish to achieve. To illustrate the importance of the concept of utility, I took a 10-euro bill and destroyed it in class. So, to a greater or lesser extent, everyone's blood ran cold. Am I right? What I was trying to achieve was precisely that. With that action, my end was to communicate an important idea to the students in such a way that they will never forget it. Means, I will take a 10-euro bill and rip it up in front of everyone. Note that ultimately, in physical terms, it was almost nothing. A piece of paper, a piece of cellulose with ink printed on it. But we all felt our blood run cold because we all needed those 10 euros. We all had in mind what we could have done with 10 euros. And the professor goes and rips up the bill. Maybe somebody picked up the pieces. What we did was to project the value we attached to any sort of end onto a specific means that would have allowed us to achieve that end. And I think that is precisely the message that was engraved in our minds and that we will never forget. And we said that means, by definition, must be scarce, which is the fifth essential element. What does this communicate? It communicates that the actor believes the means available to him or her are not sufficient to achieve all of the ends the actor is pursuing. Notice that the concept of scarcity, just like the concept of ends, means, value, and utility, is subjective, in the sense that it is the subject, the actor, the man or woman involved in an action in a specific concept, who creates, discovers, determines, the one who values or feels the need or urge to achieve an end. This is the person who discovers or creates the means and assigns utility to it. The concepts of value and utility cannot be objectively observed from the outside. An outside observer cannot decide what has value and what does not. He or she cannot simply pontificate like an academic or a public official or a bureaucrat. No, it is you, each and every one of you, when you act, when you perform your concrete actions, that creates the end, seeks out the means, and assigns value and utility to them. The same is true of the concept of scarcity. I gave the example that something that is very scarce in physical terms can be overabundant if no one desires it. I offered the example of a grain of sand from a hypothetical beach in Japan. We have been discussing the essential elements of the idea of human action. So far we have covered 5 of these essential elements, specifically ends, value, means, utility, and the concept of scarcity. Now we are going to introduce the 6th element of the idea of human action, and it is as follows. The ends to which the actor assigns value and the means to which he or she assigns utility are organized in the actor's mind in the form of what we will call a plan of action. In other words, the actor, any one of us when we act, incorporates those ends and means into a plan of action. Now, that incorporation of ends and means does not have to be explicit, minutely detailed, or expressed in writing. When it comes to the vast majority of the actions we perform, we incorporate the ends and means into a tacit plan, an implicit plan. I define the plan in this way. The plan is the perspective, that is, relating to the future, mental picture that the actor conjures up of the different stages, elements and circumstances which may have a bearing on his action. I repeat, the plan is a perspective relating to the future, mental picture into which we actors incorporate the different stages we believe we must complete to achieve our end, the different elements of our action, the ends, available means, etc. And in general, all the circumstances of time and place which might have a bearing on our action. All human beings, when we act, more or less explicitly, we plan our actions. Certainly, none of us is silly enough to think, I get up in the morning. Though perhaps it is possible, what do I need to do? Have breakfast. Just a minute, I have to draw up my plan. I get a pencil and paper. What do I do? 1, I take off my pajamas. 2, I shower. 3, I go to the fridge. 4, I look for, come on. We are used to thinking of such things tacitly, virtually automatically. Our prospective mental picture of the different stages emerges almost immediately, and we know what we have to do. Only very substantial, complex, new actions, or ones we are not very familiar with, require us to sit down and draw up a formal, explicit plan. However, we almost never do so, because we are used to creating a mental picture of our plans in a tacit way, in most cases. Nevertheless, I am going to tell you about a custom I have. Once a year, in the summer, when I am relaxed, I sit down in my rocking chair under a pine tree next to the Mediterranean, and for several afternoons, I update my overall plan of conduct. What do I do? I peacefully reflect on the last year. What did I set out to accomplish? What surprises have come up? How have I reacted? When do I feel my actions have been correct, and when have they been incorrect? In all areas of life, in my profession, in my family, in academic life. Then, I try to draw lessons from my experiences, and I try to visualize my goals for the upcoming year. Well, this year, I am launching the 7th year of the master's program, and I will also be teaching the audiovisual communication students, and let's see if I can publish my book in other countries, maybe in France or Italy. And in my company, I'm going to do this and do that. I recommend you try this, but few of us do, and whether we do or not has to do with our nature, how organized or spontaneous we are. However, beyond this, the vast majority of my actions are carried out based on tacit, prospective plans. I perform them out of habit or custom, more automatically, more implicitly. This is important because there is a debate over who should be planning, either the actor, who is on site and wishes to pursue his ends, or someone else for him, Papa State, for instance. We will see that central planning, imposed from above via the coercive power of the state, blocks precisely the creative planning capacities of ordinary human beings. I will not give you scientific conclusions ahead of time, which we will arrive at in due course, but we will study the theorem of the impossibility of socialism. That is, why it is impossible to organize the social process comprised of millions of human beings, each of whom boldly desires to seek out his or her ends and means in order to achieve them in the context of his or her own small-scale plans, in specific circumstances of time and place. We will study the impossibility of planning this process from above by means of the power of the state. This is because such attempts to plan contradict human nature and block the creative capacity of ordinary human beings, who are precisely the main figures in the social process. Regardless of the beauty of the socialist ideal, to try to accomplish all the ends and defeat all the evils in the world through the power of the state, we will see that it does not matter how well-intentioned the authorities' ends are. And it does not matter whether they are politically left-wing, right-wing, or in the center. The authorities will always come face-to-face with harsh reality. It is impossible to centrally plan the extremely complex process of social cooperation, which is embodied in the market, in which the leading roles are played by all ordinary human beings. This is precisely because this social process rests on the fact that all of us, with the first-hand knowledge that we have about the ends and means that interest us, have devised our own plan, and a plan coercively imposed from above blocks our capacity to plan on an individual level. Now then, we have covered the end with its value and the means with its utility. We have seen that means are scarce. We have discussed the plan, which we develop more or less tacitly. But something is still missing. It is no use to say, I have discovered an end which I value highly. I really like this girl a lot, so I need a means to win her over. So maybe I will ask her to a disco, etc. The means is scarce because I am short on cash. In fact, today I needed those 10 euros the professor ripped up. but let's see if I can tighten my belt and buy her a drink. End, winning the heart of the woman of my life, an end I value tremendously. Means, asking her out to a disco or for a drink, and that is why I attach utility to the €10 bill, which for me is scarce. This brings us to the plan. I am going to make a plan. I am going to approach her and see if she likes me and is interested in me. I could wear some cologne, for instance. Any little strategy. So, that is the plan. However, it is of no use for me to do all of this if, in the moment of truth, when the lady comes in, I stand paralyzed and do nothing. There must be an act of will. That is, we must move. We must set ourselves in motion in pursuit of the end we wish to achieve. The act of will is essential. Notice that we are dissecting elements that appear to be separate, but in action they all occur together, automatically. I like this girl. I am going to win her affections. I make the plan immediately. This is the moment. And boom, I start to talk to her. I have set myself in motion. But an act of will is necessary. How many actions are frustrated because, though they may be well planned, in the end we do nothing. We stand paralyzed. We do not do a thing. So, we have discussed ends, value, means, utility, scarcity, plans of action, and acts of will. 7 elements. Today we are going to introduce another key element of economics, and that is the concept of time. Dear students, all human action takes place in time. All human action takes time. If there is one important aspect of the view of economics I am presenting to you, it is that it is a subjectivist view of economics. As I have said, ends are subjective and are not given. The subject determines them. The same is true of the means. The concept of scarcity is also subjective. Well, in economics, the concept of time is a subjective concept. What does this mean? It means that time, as we are referring to it, is time as the subject feels and experiences it in the context of each action.
En el contexto de cada acción. Es decir, no nos estamos refiriendo.
In other words, we are not referring to objective time, but to the feeling we have that time is passing as we are imagining and completing the different stages of each action process.
Imaginando y culminando las diferentes etapas de cada proceso de acción. Es la concepción que vamos a llamar subjetivista.
We will call this the subjectivist view of time, in the sense that the subject feels the passage of time precisely because he or she acts and completes stages. So we discover and create ends and seek out means to accomplish them. And we combine everything into a cocktail of stages. And as we complete these stages, we sense the passage of time.
Es la acción. In
the subjectivist view of time, it is action itself that gives us the sense that time flows.
Subjetivista del tiempo. Y así se puede dar la paradoja.
Thus, sometimes the paradox arises that in a period that is objectively, chronologically very short, we pack in a lot of life. We experience the culmination of many stages. Napoleon lived a relatively short life. He died at the age of 51, and yet he declared, "What a saga my life has been. So many experiences, battles, etc." In contrast, imagine a different person, maybe an older person who has lived 90 years, an entire life, in the country, doing the same things over and over again. In the subjectivist view of time, that person has lived less, even though he or she is older. What I am saying is that the more we act, the more responsibilities we have, the more complications we are involved in, the faster we feel time is passing. Furthermore, this is a constant in human life. Let us remember our childhood. Did it not seem as if time stood still? Our first memories, maybe from when we were 3, 4, or 5 years old, or going to school, are from a period when time seemed to stand still. And yet those were very few years. As we mature and acquire responsibilities, start a family, engage in entrepreneurial projects, time speeds up. Older people tell us that time passes faster and faster for them. That is a rough way of explaining this truth I am talking about.
que en términos subjetivos el tiempo,
In subjective terms, the passage of subjective time is perceived as we act. The more actions we are involved in, the more time we feel is passing.
más tiempo sentimos que está transcurriendo. Les voy a dar una lección importantísima.
Listen, I'm going to teach you a very important lesson. Our brains have been warped for years due to the education we received in school. We have only been taught, and we are only used to, the concept of objective time, and not that of subjective time.
No de tiempo subjetivo. El tiempo objetivo es lo que se llama
Objective
el tiempo
time is also known as chronological time, chronos.
El tiempo objetivo o tiempo cronológico
Objective or chronological time is simply an analogy for the physical reality of movement.
que es el movimiento. Ustedes saben que hay dos tipos de relojes, ¿no?
You know there are two types of watches, right?
Digitales.
Digital watches are called digital because they display the time in digits.
Con dígitos. Pero la mayor parte
However, most of us have an analog watch, like mine for instance. Why are they called analog watches? Where is the analogy in an analog watch?
Del reloj analógico. Es exactamente la idea que les acabo de decir.
It lies precisely in the idea I have just expressed. The analogy is as follows. Analog watches reflect the passage of time as an analogy for movement.
Podíamos, por ejemplo, un reloj
For
analógico,
example, we could conceive of an analog watch that could be represented as a ruler. So we could draw a ruler, and there would be a cursor here. Every 5 minutes, the cursor would move,
y después de una hora el
and at
cursor.
the end of an hour, the cursor would be here.
Claro, si tuviéramos este reloj
Of course, if
analógico
we all
todos,
had a
imagínense
watch
una
like
regla,
this ruler,
sería
it would be
incomodísimo. Yo le
extremely
metería en el ojo.
awkward. We would be poking each other's eyes out.
Entonces se nos ocurrió
So it
coger
occurred to
una
us to
esfera
use a circular face, which is much more comfortable,
para
to express
recoger
that
esa
analogy
analogía
between
del
movement
transcurso
and the
del tiempo.
passage of time in its physical,
En
objective
su
sense.
sentido físico y objetivo. Pero el mundo de la física,
However, the
y de la
world of
ciencia
physics
natural,
and the
nada tiene
natural
que ver con el mundo
sciences
de la
bears
acción
no
humana.
relation to the world of human action.
En el mundo de la física,
In the world of physics, time
el
is a
tiempo
dimension,
es una dimensión,
the fourth
la cuarta
dimension,
dimensión, que no es sino una analogía.
which is simply
del
an
movimiento.
analogy for movement.
Imagínense ustedes que estamos en el polo norte,
Imagine we are at the North Pole on any day between the 21st of March and the 21st of
desde el
September.
21 de marzo hasta el 21 de septiembre. Ya saben ustedes que es continuamente de
As
día.
you know, during that
Estamos en el Polo
period,
Norte.
the sun is constantly visible. We are at the North Pole.
Bueno, pues en el polo norte,
Well, at the
ustedes
North
ven el
Pole,
sol,
you can see the sun, and the
el
sun
sol se va
moves.
moviendo, transcurrido una hora,
After 1
una
hour,
hora,
another
otra
hour,
hora,
another
como si fuera
hour,
una inmensa
as if it were
esfera,
marking the hours on an enormous clock face.
hasta que vuelve al lugar
The
donde
sun
estaba.
moves until it returns to its
Tiene un
original
inmenso
position.
reloj.
The sun is like a hand on a huge watch.
Vuelve a donde
The sun returns to where it was before.
el tiempo es
Time is an analogy for movement,
del movimiento. Y el
and the
futuro,
future,
en
in
la
the objective
concepción
physical view
objetiva
of
y
time,
física del tiempo,
is already there.
está ahí.
It
Solo
merely has
falta
to
que venga.
arrive.
El futuro, si nosotros
If we are
estamos aquí,
here on this analog watch,
en este reloj analógico, el futuro dentro de una hora ya está.
in an hour,
es cuando
the
el
future
cursor
will have
esté aquí.
arrived. It will be
Solo
when the
falta que se
cursor
mueva
is
de aquí
here. The
hasta
cursor
aquí,
must
pero ya
simply
está
move
dado.
from here to here. But the
Igual
future is already given.
Que en el polo norte,
Just as at the North Pole, in
Dentro de
24 hours,
24
the sun
horas,
will have returned to
el
what
sol
was
estará
today its
exactamente
starting point.
desde donde hoy ha partido. El futuro es
The future is an extension of the present in terms of physical movement, and in a sense the future is already given. It is there. It merely has to arrive at today.
que llegue a hoy. Es por tanto un porvenir.
Therefore, the future is to come.
significa moverse
To
hacia
come
uno.
means to move toward one. The future
futuro es un
is to
porvenir.
come.
Estoy explicando todas estas realidades
I am
porque, por
explaining all of
contraste,
these
vamos a
truths
ver
because in
que es
contrast, we are
radicalmente
going to see that the
distinto al concepto
subjectivist view
subjetivo
of
del tiempo. Ahora
time
vamos a
is
explicar que
radically
el futuro
different,
en el tiempo
kairos.
subjetivo de la acción humana
We
es
are
un
going to see
porvenir.
that the future in the subjective time of human action is not to come, It is to be made. But let us not get ahead of ourselves. Let us just take note of the contrast between to come and to be made. For now, we will stay in the world of the objective chronos of physicists and the natural sciences, which bears no relation to the world of economics and human action, in which the leading roles are played by human beings. Actually, rather than to come, we could say the future is to return, at least from the perspective of Einstein's physics. Einstein discovered that space is not straight but curved, and a particle travelling at the speed of light through the universe after X millions of years returns. The future is to return. And in fact, this is very well illustrated by the enormous astronomical clock provided by the sun at the North Pole, or at the South Pole, between the 21st of September and the 21st of March. If we pick up an almanac, we can predict the time of the sunrise to within fractions of a second. That future is given because the sun will rise tomorrow at the predicted time. We have been discussing objective chronological time, chronos, which as a matter of fact has nothing to do with time in economics, the time perceived by human beings who act, kairos. The concept of time, crucial to men and women who act, to each and every one of us, the time that is anthropologically crucial, is not chronological time, but subjective time. It is the time the subject, thus the term subjective time, experiences as he or she acts and completes the different stages in his or her plan of action. Subjective time is radically different from objective time. Subjective time is the experience a human being has when he discovers an end that is worthwhile to him, seeks out means to achieve it, gets down to work, and embarks on an action to complete the stages he deems necessary to achieve that end. As he works through the stages, he feels the passage of time. When human beings act, they do not think of time in terms of specific hours, days and years. No. Instead, they think, I started school, I passed the school year, I got through adolescence with more or less trouble, I enrolled at the university as a young adult, I looked for a girlfriend, I got married, I had children, the first, the second, the third, you see, completing stages. I started my company, the first one failed, the second one also went under, but the third one was successful. I consolidated my earnings, saved and retired. These are life stages that take the shape of actions which we carry out as we progress through life. With respect to subjective time, it is very important to understand that, contrary to what happens in physics and the natural sciences, the future is not there yet. It is not given, nor is it to come. Instead, the actor must build the future, piece by piece. The future is not to come. The future is to be made. And how do we make the future? By imagining it in the form of expectations, another essential economic concept. Expectations, dear students, share the same nature as our memories of our past actions. We creatively recombine these memories and project them into the future. In fact, we are going to do an experiment together in class today. I am going to demonstrate to you that there is no difference between remembering the past and imagining the future. Let us do this experiment. We are all going to close our eyes now, and we are going to recall the most pleasant moment we had last summer, during vacation. Let's do it. I am closing my eyes, and I have my image ready. Okay. And we open our eyes. Now, I'm going to ask you to please do the following. We are going to close our eyes again, and we're going to imagine what we would most like to do this coming summer vacation. This August. Let us imagine it. Done. Listen, the experience of recalling the past is qualitatively the same as the experience of imagining the future. I'm going to share with you the most pleasant moment I remember living this past summer. I was traveling in a boat from Soler along the north coast of Mallorca to Cape Formentor, and I was steering the boat. On that day, the water was as smooth as glass, and we were gliding peacefully along at 20 knots. And suddenly I saw some dolphins leaping through the water, and my young children were delighted at them. That is the scene I have just thought of, the one that has occurred to me as the most pleasant from last summer. But now we have made an immediate leap to imagining a possible future scene. Something we hope becomes a reality, something that is therefore an expectation. We have imagined what we would like to do. Some would like to take a trip, others spend time with a special person, others rest, others, etc. And we have visualized what we would do. This is a very interesting exercise because whenever we act entrepreneurially, we visualize a future end. We imagine something we would like to achieve, along with the stages necessary and the means available to us, all in the form of expectations or imagination. How do we do this? By weaving together the bits and strands of memories we have accumulated in the past. In other words, the creative, entrepreneurial capacity of human beings rests on using as building blocks the pieces of memories that are stored from the past, recombining them creatively, and projecting them into the future as expectations. Note the importance of this. I'm going to repeat it. We creatively recombine the elements of our memories of the past. We recombine them creatively, and they become expectations or imagination of future actions. The entrepreneurial creativity of different people is different, both qualitatively and quantitatively. In the same memory strands, people see different things. We are able to entrepreneurially discover that we can do different things. And that is about as far as I can dissect the essence of our innate creative capacity. In short, the future is not determined. It is not there yet, just waiting to arrive, like in the world of the natural sciences. Instead, it is there waiting for someone to discover it or create it, seek out means, get down to work, and make it into a reality. This is crucial because we are knocking the bottom out of all of modern finance theory. The possibility of assigning ratings to different investment projects, the ability to scientifically manage risk, it is all foolish nonsense. All those who act in the sphere of economic science as if it were the objective world of the natural sciences are committing a very grave error. They are failing to see the huge gulf that separates the creative, entrepreneurial nature of human beings from the world of natural sciences. The natural sciences are full of constants, proofs, and data, while the entrepreneurial world of human action is a world in which the events of tomorrow can never be known today, because they depend on entrepreneurial knowledge that has not yet been created. The future is not to come, but rather to be made. We cannot say, okay, a team of ministry economists are going to predict what will happen. Every time I hear or read something like, the International Monetary Fund has declared that next year Europe will grow 1.5% except Spain, which will grow 0.4%, and all the countries will recover except 2 or 3, this one will take 3 years, this one 2, and this one 1. All of that is a lie. It is impossible to predict such events. These economists are mistakenly treating economics as if it were a natural science. They are saying, whatever human beings do, the cursor will be there next year. No, the arrival of the cursor in economics depends on our getting to work and making it happen. You cannot assume that human beings will act in a certain way, and particularly that they will discover the knowledge necessary to achieve the ends you desire. That is why we cannot make concrete predictions in economics, predictions involving specific circumstances of time and place. In the sphere of economics and action, human beings face the future with permanent uncertainty. There is no such thing as risk. There is permanent uncertainty. Now, let us take a closer look at this concept. Why is this so? Because what happens tomorrow will depend on our behavior as entrepreneurs. It will depend on the ideas or knowledge or imagination of each and every one of us, millions of human beings, and on what we are able to discover, create, and complete. In this sense, in the sphere of economics and human action, the future is open to all of our creative possibilities. And we are not aware of the possible alternatives, so we cannot apply any decision theory. I remember when I got to Stanford, the top decision theorists were there. They would say, entrepreneurial problem, let's make a decision tree. The possible options are this, 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 and this. If I choose this one, these other alternatives may arise, and then these. And the probability weights are these, and these. Calculate the optimal decision, and we all put this data into our computers, and then optimal course of action. Wonderful! And the analysts at the Pentagon and everyone else would think, the optimal decision has been found. With this, we can avoid a world war. Win the war in Vietnam and solve... No. With this approach, people just end up beating their head against a wall because they think they know something, and they know nothing, because we do not know, nor can anyone know the possible alternatives, for they depend on the creative capacity of human beings. Until the alternatives are entrepreneurially discovered, they do not exist. It is as if back in 1850 we had said, all right, how are we going to solve the problem of weekend breaks in Hawaii in the future? If you had asked that in 1850, people would have said, he's out of his mind, he's crazy, what's he talking about? What are weekend breaks? And in Hawaii, we can't even get there. The airplane had not been invented yet. The standard of living was not high enough for people to afford vacations. Can you imagine the decision trees they would have made back in 1850? An infinite number of options had not even been discovered yet. Well, today it is just as ridiculous for us to insist on making decisions and issuing forecasts about what is going to happen even next year, let alone 50 years from now, for we have not yet created the possible alternatives. The future is permanently uncertain. Furthermore, human beings need to know their own nature. Human beings are naturally endowed with an innate creative capacity. Later we will make a slight theological digression about this. But we are endowed with an innate creative capacity which enables us to continually discover new knowledge and ideas about ends and means. And this creative capacity determines, though determine is not an entirely suitable term, but we are constrained in our choices, this determines the indeterminate quality of the future, that is, its permanent uncertainty. We human beings rebel against our own creative nature. Uncertainty makes us dizzy. We want certainty and security, and that is one of the tragedies of the human condition. In fact, there are no illnesses more serious than those in which the body's immune system malfunctions, fails to recognize the body's own cells and attacks them. Those are the most serious illnesses. Our own body attacks its own organs because it mistakes them as foreign invaders. It rebels against itself. Well, in the spiritual realm, and the realm of action, which I'm explaining here, this rebellion is the constant threat to man. We rebel against our own creative, entrepreneurial nature. It is our very nature which makes the future uncertain. And we rebel because the uncertainty of the future makes us dizzy. We demand security, certainty. We want to know what is going to happen. Much of the social crisis of our time stems from this rebellion against our own creative nature. If not, why do you think millions of people
caen en la
fall into
trampa
the trap of expecting the authorities to solve all their problems, from the day they're born till the
que
day
los
they die,
gobernantes les solucionen su vida, desde que nacen hasta que mueren, como si tal
as
cosa
if
fuera
such a
posible.
thing were possible, when indeed it is not. We demand, we want certainty. We ask for a crystal ball. Millions of people read the horoscopes every day.
Cogemos el horóscopo,
We look up our horoscope. Why not? Now that we are demanding things, people demand certainty, and the market supplies it in the horoscope section. Let's see. Capricorn. You consult your stars and read that you are going to have lots of power, success in love, must be careful with money. People read this and then go on with their day either relieved or uneasy. What a bunch of nonsense. But there is a demand for it, and there it is. Why do people read horoscopes? Because we need security. And that need very frequently keeps us in a state of indefinite immaturity. We do not accept responsibility for ourselves. We do not grow up. We want somebody else to solve all our problems. We want other people to take the responsibility. We want to blame our misfortunes on somebody else.
mal a otra tercera persona.
Anything but admit that what happens to us depends mainly on us and our own actions. No. Instead, the explanation will be, they didn't give me a big enough subsidy. I need more help. I need more support. I became addicted to drugs because of other people's actions and not my own. I had to steal the car. I can rape this girl because I like her, and I can do whatever I want, etc. And I am not responsible for anything. I am a victim of society, whatever that means. This is a reaction. Human beings rebel in this way against their own creative nature, because their nature makes the future uncertain. And we will chase any mirage, any illusion of false security.
Es como querer meter la cabeza
It is as if we wanted to stick our head in the sand like an ostrich, to hide from our problems.
cuando las avestruces esconden.
You are probably thinking, man, life really sucks. You don't know what's going to happen, and everything is uncertain. Well, that's true, but life is beautiful too, and uncertainty gives life its charm. If the future were truly given, and we could see it in a crystal ball, how boring life would be.
Aburridísimo.
We are desperately striving for a false, unattainable ideal, a future that is given.
Y
And we
demandamos
demand security from our authorities and our scientists, a future that is certain. Well, it makes no difference to me whether or not you like your own nature. My job is to help you discover it. And there is no doubt that the nature of human beings is creative, and therefore the future is permanently uncertain.
tenemos dos instrumentos,
We have two tools,
dos muletas,
two sources of support and strength to help us face the inevitably and permanently uncertain nature of the future.
inerradicablemente incierto del futuro. Y esas dos instrumentos
The two tools that help us cope with this uncertainty,
la incertidumbre
which arises from our own creative nature, are the following.
son las siguientes.
On the one hand, institutions, and on the other hand, entrepreneurship itself.
Voy a explicar
Allow me to explain both. We will start with the latter, entrepreneurship.
veremos
We will see over the course of these lessons that human beings tend to achieve the ends they set for themselves. They tend to achieve them. There is no guarantee. Therefore, it is quite clear that one way to cope with the uncertainty of the future is to get our entrepreneurial selves moving in pursuit of an end.
y si hacemos eso,
If we do this, it is highly probable that we will achieve our goal, thus reducing uncertainty.
es decir, si
For
yo
if I insist on winning over a certain lady, and I focus all of my energy on that goal, then I will come closer to
en
it.
eso, pues me aproximo
At any rate, I will come closer than if I simply ignored
si no
her.
hiciera ni caso. El ser humano es como si fuera
Human
una
beings
antena
are like
parabólica
directional satellite dishes, and if I direct my entire being, my capacity to create new information, my entrepreneurial ingenuity and alertness in pursuit of an end, I will approach it.
me aproximo a él. Lo que les estoy
What I am
diciendo
telling you is that human beings face the future just as a sailor faces a storm on a black, moonless night. Do you know what it is like to be in a sailboat at night in the middle of a storm? You go through hell. You cannot see a thing. The wind is blowing in all directions. You can hardly tell what is happening. Can you imagine if sailors lacked even a compass? However, if in the middle of that storm, like in the storm that surrounds us as we face the permanently uncertain future, we suddenly see, between the crests of the waves, the faint light of a lighthouse, then in spite of all our troubles, we know where our destination is. We know where we are headed, and we will tend to approach it. That light is a real aid to sailors. And as each of us navigates through life by acting, our primary aid is our own entrepreneurial capacity. We tend to achieve the ends we pursue. Logically, if I am intent on finishing my bachelor's degree and obtaining my master's, I will probably do so, and thus reduce uncertainty. Our own action reduces uncertainty to the extent that we complete and accomplish the stages in our action processes. I want to get married. I look for a girlfriend, I win her affections, and we get married. I have reduced uncertainty. 5 years earlier, I had no idea who was going to be the woman of my life. 5 years later, I am married to her, hopefully. The best way to reduce the uncertainty of the future is to make the future, to build it. There is another source of aid and strength to help us face the permanent uncertainty of the future. We find this source of help in institutions, which constitute another essential element in economics. In this economics course, we are taking a fundamentally institutional approach. We will define institution as any pattern or rule of behavior human beings follow. We will study the emergence of institutions. Institutions emerge spontaneously. The institutions most important to life and society communicate a large quantity of practical knowledge and could not have been devised by any one person or group of people, no matter how wise and good. This is true in all institutional spheres, for example, that of language. Language is vital if we are to cope with the permanent uncertainty of the future. It is vital that I be able to speak and that you understand me in Spanish, in English, or German, or Dutch. Language has spontaneously evolved over the course of many generations of human beings, each of whom has made his or her own small contribution through experiences, feelings, and needs. In fact, languages are living things which continue to evolve as institutions. We also find institutions in the sphere of morality and law. Morality derives from the Latin mos moris, meaning custom or tradition. We learn to adopt behaviors that make life in society possible. And this learning takes place without our being aware of it, nor of its implications. We internalize these behaviors from a young age in the basic cells of society, the family, the community, and religious groups which formalize these behaviors and give meaning to the whole. We know that a handshake is binding, or should be binding. In what sense? In the sense that we must fulfill the promise or contract. In any case, such behaviors have been refined in an evolutionary manner and have taken the shape of legal guidelines, and hence we know what is right and wrong in the sphere of law and morality. And this reduces future uncertainty to a certain extent. For example, I marry someone, marriage for life. Uncertainty is thus reduced, both for him and for her, or at least it has been so until now, because these days, with quick and easy divorce, this is for life, assuming we're still in love, of course, because if love fades, it will obviously make no sense for us to stay married, and we'll just separate. So, while before, uncertainty had been substantially reduced, now it skyrockets. What are the ramifications of this? We will be discussing them. I am concentrating on this topic now in my research on dynamic efficiency and the role of private morality in the sphere of the family, etc., increasing or decreasing uncertainty. The topic has enormous implications in terms of dynamic inefficiency. We will talk more about it in the future. So in theory, when a person gets married, well, these days there is the silly notion of marrying for love. Please, don't any of you marry for love. What a ridiculous notion. That is where the trap lies. I'm marrying because I'm in love. And when love fades, what then? People should not marry for love. Instead, they should fall in love with the person they have decided to marry or should marry. People have got it all backwards. You must not accuse me of being unromantic. No, no. We will talk about this at different times in the course. Do not be so foolish as to marry for love. Love is not the reason to get married. In any case, it is the icing on the cake, the seasoning. This is because, among other reasons, love fades. At least, the passionate infatuation of youth. Love changes shape. Imagine a man who marries because he is in love, and then after 2, 3, 4 or 5 years, he is saying, "Hey, I love you a lot. You're the mother of my children, but obviously young women are very attractive. It's not my fault. You have to understand. I have a right to start life over again." We all read hello. So what is the natural thing? He kicks her out of his life. "I'll see you around." There is a quick divorce, and off he goes with a young woman. So, what is happening here? Where before there was a reduction in uncertainty thanks to the institution of lifelong marriage, now there is a dramatic increase in uncertainty. And we see that human beings who are weaker without that support are thwarted in many of their actions, and the result is systemic dynamic inefficiency throughout the entire social process. I am explaining to you the most abstract truths of economic and social theory, in small doses and from the beginning, but we will gradually spell them out throughout the course. There is another approach. I could say, I will never be sure marriage will work out. For what I am telling you about marriage is also valid for a business enterprise. But what if she is a woman of principle, a very religious woman, who believes she will go to hell for all eternity if she leaves, and the man believes the same of himself? Then the worries tend to dissipate. They can both be more confident about taking a leap of faith, because the level of uncertainty drops. We will see that societies in which people have strong principles and reduce uncertainty are societies that prosper, because they are dynamically efficient, while societies which thwart or destroy their intentions, the second source of support that enables us to face the permanent uncertainty of the future, are societies which disintegrate. They are dynamically inefficient societies. I am speaking strictly in terms of economic theory and the scientific analysis of the processes of social cooperation. I am not speaking in religious terms. I would like you to see how patterned behaviors, whether in the sphere of language, or of law, or of morality, or of economics, money is the quintessential social institution. You might ask, "Professor, how can money be the quintessential social institution? Shouldn't it be morality, or law, or language?" No, it is money. Money comes first. It makes possible an exponential increase in exchanges between people, and these exchanges give rise to everything else. The rest of the institutions evolve, and that will be all until Christmas. So, time is an essential concept. All human action takes place in time. However, those words are a little misleading. They give the impression that time is external, and I go inside it when I act. No, time is what I feel when I act. Without action, there is no time. I remember a movie I saw as a child many years ago, and it was called Johnny Got His Gun. It was about a man who goes to war and loses everything. He is blind and deaf. He has lost his limbs. All is dark, and so he cannot act, except in his thoughts. Time stops for him, because he no longer acts. The subjective concept of time. In the subjective concept of time, expectations or imagination of future actions plays an essential role. How do human beings form expectations? By creatively recombining and using as raw material the bits of past memories already in our minds. By the way, memories of the past are not objective. Just as our expectation or imagination of the future is like memories projected into the future in a creative way that had not been conceived of before, when we did the exercise of remembering the past, we remembered it subjectively. 5 of us could have been together in the same place at the same time last summer, and we would remember it 5 radically different ways, or with different nuances. We have seen, and more importantly, we have felt and stored the experience in our own way. It is as if our own subjective view of the past had fused with our creative way of envisioning the future.
de ver de manera creativa el futuro. Y tenemos esa
We have that capacity to recombine our subjective past experiences and creatively project them into the future. So I have a bit of the past here, another there, and another there, and they are unconnected. And then suddenly, eureka! A light goes on in my head, and I see the possibility of connecting them and writing a brilliant screenplay. An act of entrepreneurial creativity in the audiovisual field.
de la ciencia audiovisual. O una
Or a new operating system, Windows, or two guys in a garage who say, everybody's making big mainframes. How absurd. Why don't we make something small, a personal computer? And they go to IBM, and the bosses say, a personal computer will never be successful, and send them packing. And the guys have to leave with their personal computer. Idiots! You're idiots! And they leave with their tail between their legs. They go to another company where they are shown the door again. And then they go to Xerox or Apple Computer and are told, well, yes, we're going to give this a try, but we're very skeptical. The guys had a creative vision, and the idiots were the bosses at IBM who almost missed out. Pure conceit blinded them. In all spheres, expectations enable us to envision the future. This makes the future permanently uncertain because our creative capacity allows us to discover new information from nothing. This is our nature, and it makes us dizzy. The great temptation of human beings is to react against our own creative nature and try to create a mirage of security that makes us feel safe for the future. And as we have discussed, the resulting temptation facing us is to avoid growing up, to avoid accepting responsibility, to blame others for what happens to us, or because the cursor has not arrived where we wanted without any action from us. For in economics, in the sphere of action, in our lives, the future is not to come. Let's just see what happens. I'll just stay here and see what tomorrow brings. No. What tomorrow brings depends on what you do today. If you just remain passive, life will simply pass you by, and you will not achieve anything. The future is to be built. It is to be made. Please reflect on this. Our great temptation is to rebel against our own creative nature, against the permanently uncertain nature of the future, and demand security where there is none. However, we do have some tools to help us. They assist us. They do not provide a guarantee, but they make things easier. They permit us, that is the correct term, they permit us to face up to the uncertainty of the future with a chance of success. One tool is our own entrepreneurship. When we get down to work, we tend to achieve the ends we have set for ourselves. We tend to achieve them. There is no guarantee. As we move toward the lighthouse, in the midst of that dark storm, we approach the lighthouse. We definitely come closer to it than we would if it were invisible to us. We tend to achieve the ends we set for ourselves. Our first attempt may fail, and the second, and the third. We will have setbacks, but in the end we will come closer. The other tool that permits us to face the future consists of institutions, patterned behaviors. If I say to you, this Thursday we will either have economics class at 7 or we will not. Then after class today, everyone will be saying, there is permanent uncertainty. We just do not know. No idea. In all likelihood, we will have class. We can infer this from our behavior patterns, which are institutional. For instance, I do not come here in my birthday suit, but in a suit and tie. Also, we have all made a calendar. We have analog watches that tell chronological time, which is nothing like the time we experience, and we all agree to arrive at the same hour. Some come by bus, others by car, etc. So, yes, we are going to have class. Why? Because, entrepreneurially speaking, I am going to insist on having class, and because we follow rules or patterns of behavior. However, there is no guarantee, nor is it certain that we will have class. Thousands of events could occur to frustrate next Thursday's class. Nevertheless, our near-automatic institutional behavior and entrepreneurial alertness tend to help us achieve what we desire, and that gives us a false sense of certainty about the future.
En economía no se puede utilizar.
In economics, we cannot use probability calculations, nor Bayes' theorem. You might respond, but Professor, everything they teach us here has to do with statistics and probabilities. And they give us an operation designed to help us solve concrete problems in a company. I will never forget a marketing class in which the professor said, the demand function for the cars a company produces is, and he put it in front of us, and market research has determined that it is going to change to this. Calculate the number of cars the company will sell. And everyone got busy calculating, and out popped an answer. The result, the number of cars that would be sold. And I raised my hand and said, excuse me, but that doesn't make any sense, because if things worked that way, no company would ever fail. They would all be successful. We will see that neither demand functions nor probabilities are applicable, nor can they be calculated. Market studies are useless. Why are they done then? For the same reason horoscopes are written. People ask for them. You want them and you're willing to pay? I'll do them for you. I've got to eat too. Market studies give people a false sense of security. It is very important that we distinguish between two different concepts of probability. In human action, Mises calls them class probability and case probability. We must distinguish between them because we constantly speak in human terms and in terms of the actions of probability. In the world of the natural sciences, the applicable concept is that of class probability. What does class probability mean? It means we know the behavior of a set of phenomena, a set of elements, but not the isolated behavior of each element in the set. For example, we know that 3 people out of every 1,000 who are 40 years of age will die next year. If you take a set of 1,000 people who are 40 years old, you know that 3 will die. But you do not know the exact first and last name of the unfortunate ones. When there is a set of elements that are homogeneous phenomena, and we know how they behave as a class, as a whole, but not the isolated behavior of each individual element, the applicable concept is that of class probability. This is the concept relevant to the sphere of the natural sciences. If we have a fair 6-sided die and we throw it 1,000 times, each side will land up approximately 1/6 of the time. We do not know which side will land up on any one throw, and the way we express that we do not know is to say that the probability is 1/6. We know how the set behaves. If we toss a fair coin in the air 1,000 times, our outcome will tend to be heads half the time and tails half the time. We do not know what the outcome of any single toss will be, but we do know the behavior of the class. This is the concept of probability that applies to the world of the natural sciences. And this concept of probability gives rise to the idea of risk. The idea of risk is the province of the natural sciences. There is risk we can calculate in terms of probability. My risk of death is 3 out of 1,000, because I know that 3 out of a set of 1,000 people to which I belong are going to die. I do not know if I will be one of the unlucky ones, but I run a risk, which can be measured by class probability. This risk can be expressed mathematically. It can be dealt with from the perspective of probability theory. And furthermore, it is insurable as part of a class of phenomena. Indeed, I do not know who the unlucky ones will be. I do not know which specific 3 people will die, but I can insure their lives. If there are 1,000 people, and each one contributes €3, then 3,000 euros can be set aside in a pouch, and later 1,000 euros can be given to the heirs of each of the people who die. In that way, they have been insured against loss. If I know that 1 out of every 100,000 homes is going to burn down, I can insure myself by paying a premium. A fund is created, and when it is known who has drawn the short straw, the insurance company compensates that person. The risk is insurable as part of a class of homogeneous phenomena. The concept of probability is applied to a situation of risk, which means we know the behavior of the class, but not that of its individual members. The concept of class probability is an essential object of research in the sphere of the natural sciences. There are different ways of approaching it. There is a logical concept, the number of favorable cases divided by the number of possible cases. For example, heads or tails, 1/2, 50%, or one side of a die, 1/6, or 3 deaths out of every 1,000 people, 3 divided by 1,000 in a mortality table. This is the logical concept of probability, or the frequency concept. I toss the coin 1,000 times, and if it is a fair coin, the outcome will tend to be something like 498 and 502, heads or tails. And the more times I toss the coin, the closer the two numbers will come to each other. It is essential that the elements be homogeneous, that is, that they be entirely interchangeable. This is the concept of probability in the world of the natural sciences. Now let us take a look at the concept of probability in the world of human action, which has nothing to do with that of the natural sciences. In the world of human action, we face unique events, which are historically unrepeatable. Mises calls them unique events, or single events. They are historically unrepeatable. There are no classes of homogeneous phenomena. I repeat, there is only a unique, historically unrepeatable event. Some of the factors which affect the event are known, and they can bring about a certain result. Others are not known. In fact, those factors are not external, but rather they depend on how we act. In the world of human action, the applicable concept is that of case probability. There is no class. There is only a single historical event which will never occur again in exactly the same form. We know some of the factors, and these may suggest a certain outcome, but we do not know all of them. Further, the outcome will depend on our own actions. For instance, it is no use to say 50% of marriages end after 3 years, so I get married and think, well, there's a 50% chance that 3 years from now I'll be divorced. No. A marriage between John and Mary is a historically unrepeatable event. It is not a homogeneous phenomenon. Now, if I am a close friend of both John and Mary, I might say, it'll never last, I'm not even going to the wedding. Or the opposite. I might say, yes, I feel I know them. They are mature people. They have dated and gotten to know each other. They make a great couple and complement each other well. They seem made for each other. I think their marriage will last. It is the same with soccer. Those of you who are soccer fans are used to hearing, over the last 25 or 50 games between Real Madrid and Barcelona, Barcelona has won 70% of the time. Do you think that gives you any information about what is going to happen in the very next game? It provides no information at all. The game that is about to begin is a unique, historically unrepeatable event. I may think, Real Madrid have just signed so-and-so, and they've got a great coach, and they've given him such and such a bonus, and these days Barca are looking a little weak. I think Real Madrid are going to win. And particularly, if you are a member of the team, you are going to do all you can to win. This is another essential part of the concept of case probability. You help bring about the result by the way you act. In the sphere of human action and case probability, there is no insurable risk. Instead, there is ineradicable uncertainty, which is not insurable. Does anyone know why there is no such thing as marriage insurance? Why not? Insurance companies are losing out. I am the president of one. Are insurers blind? What a business opportunity! I pay a premium, and if my wife turns out to be a dud and our marriage is a disaster, no problem. The insurance company pays me €1 million. Well, let's go sign. Why is there no marriage insurance? I have just explained it. There is no marriage insurance for the same reason there is no bankruptcy insurance. It is technically impossible. Listen, The success of a company depends primarily on the effort, valor, interest, work, and entrepreneurial alertness of those behind it, the driving force. They must negotiate skillfully with the unions, answer no to many requests, strive for the best quality, compete. It is very difficult. And beyond that, the company may or may not be successful. However, if I have bankruptcy insurance and things are not going well, and if they should end badly, I receive 5 million euros, do you really think? I mean, entrepreneurs like people like you and me. If someone comes in and asks for a raise, the first impulse is to say yes to everyone. Right now, we're good people. Yes to everyone, to everything. I'll give you a raise. Poor supplier, I'm going to pay him more. What a nice person you are, etc. But what happens if we do that? The company goes bust. If I have an insurance policy that stipulates that if things go badly, I receive 10 million euros, my company will fail. The probability, case probability, of the company's going bankrupt, considering that my behavior as an entrepreneur affects the outcome, the probability of failure is much higher. And therefore the insurance company would go under. The same is true of marriage. The success or failure of a marriage, I'll need you as long as love lasts, is hogwash. So is, well, what do I do with her now? No, the marriage will work if both spouses put everything they have into it, everything necessary to make it work. And that requires alertness, effort, and sacrifice. But if they are not willing to invest the effort, the marriage falls apart. Think what would happen to the effort, sacrifice, and work required of both parties to make the marriage successful if, on top of everything, there is an insurance policy that will pay 1 million euros if things go badly. That reduces the incentive to make an effort. I sure do love you, but let's cash in that policy, okay? And they boot each other out. So what would happen? The number of divorces would skyrocket and the insurance company would go under. No historically unrepeatable event is insurable. Let's take out an insurance policy. We are the 11 players on the Real Madrid team. It's going to be a tough game and we might lose to Barcelona. Let's go to an insurance company, maybe Lloyd's. Let's get them to agree to pay each of us 5 million euros if we lose. What are we waiting for? How are these guys going to play now? Do you think they're going to knock themselves out to score? No, just as the others are not going to knock themselves out to make their company successful or to save their marriage. Thus we see that unique, historically unrepeatable events are not insurable. The probability that determines their occurrence is case probability. There is no homogeneous class that permits us to spread out the risk, because there is no risk but rather uncertainty. And furthermore, what happens will depend on the behavior of the main people involved in the action in question.